When Los Lobos cartel enforcers surrounded Miguel Ortiz's truck at the border stop, mocking his silence and eyeing his rig, they saw just another vulnerable driver. What they didn't know was that Ortiz had once been an undefeated MMA heavyweight champion. Now, as they reached for his door, years of professional fighting instincts were already taking over. Los Lobos cartel enforcers surrounded Miguel Ortiz's truck at the border stop, mocking his silence and eyeing his rig. They saw just another vulnerable driver. What they didn't know was that Ortiz had once been an undefeated MMA heavyweight champion. Now, as they reached for his door, years of professional fighting instincts were already taking over. Miguel stepped down from his Kenworth movements, deliberately unhurried as he faced the approaching cartel members. His posture projected ordinary caution, rather than the balanced readiness that had once made him the most effective counter-striker in professional MMA. Ramirez closed distance with the calculated confidence of someone accustomed to immediate compliance. His enforcers maintained perfect spacing, two flanking their leader, one circling to Miguel's blind side, another maintaining position near the truck's cab. Standard intimidation formation. "Nice rig," Ramirez commented, voice carrying practiced casualness beneath clear threat. "Kenworth W900. Expensive maintenance on these border routes." Miguel nodded, his expression neutral. "Gets the job done. This stretch of highway has special considerations," Ramirez continued, gesturing broadly. "Security concerns, road hazards, unexpected delays. Smart drivers arrange protection." Through his peripheral vision, Miguel tracked the enforcer attempting to access his truck's cab. The man's movements betrayed professional assessment, checking for alarms, evaluating security systems, cataloging potential obstacles. "Been making this run 3 years without issues," Miguel responded, voice deliberately quiet. The controlled tone had once been his trademark in pre-fight interviews, reporters mistaking calm for lack of intensity, opponents confusing stillness for vulnerability. Ramirez's smile hardened. "Circumstances change. Los Lobos now ensures safe passage, 5,000 per crossing." Miguel watched the men's positioning, analyzing distances, angles, reaction capabilities. 3 years removed from professional fighting hadn't diminished his tactical assessment skills. The enforcer at his blind side had shifted weight to his forward foot, telegraphing potential movement. Amateur mistake no trained fighter would make. "That's steep for road access," Miguel observed, maintaining neutral posture while calculating optimal response scenarios. "Not just access." Ramirez stepped closer, intentionally violating personal space. "Insurance. Protection against unfortunate accidents." The implied threat hung in the desert air. Miguel maintained stillness, the same disciplined non-reaction that had frustrated aggressive opponents in the octagon. His fighting career had taught him that responding emotionally to intimidation tactics surrendered tactical advantage. "Something else," Ramirez continued, eyes hardening. "Your cargo space. We require transportation for certain products, regular arrangement, generous compensation, drug smuggling." The cartel's standard progression: establish territorial control, then convert legitimate transport into narcotics distribution. Miguel had heard similar stories from other independent truckers pressured into becoming unwilling cartel assets. "I run legitimate cargo," Miguel stated simply. Ramirez's expression darkened. "Perhaps you misunderstand. This isn't negotiation." The enforcer at Miguel's blind side moved suddenly, grabbing his arm while another stepped forward. Standard two-man control technique. Miguel allowed the hold, suppressing the automatic counter that had once dislocated an opponent's shoulder. During his third title defense, "On your knees," Ramirez commanded, satisfaction evident as Miguel complied without resistance. "Good. First lesson in respect." Through the diner window, Miguel noted Rosie watching, tension in her posture as she reached for a phone. Several truck stop patrons had moved away from windows. Understanding the unfolding situation required strategic non-intervention. "Los Lobos owns these routes," Ramirez continued, producing a knife that he pressed against Miguel's cheek. "We determine who passes, what they carry, and what they pay. Understand?" Miguel remained silent, eyes downcast, presenting the appearance of submission, while his trained awareness tracked every cartel member's position. The knife pressure increased, drawing a thin line of blood along his cheekbone. "When asked a question, you answer," Ramirez emphasized, twisting the blade slightly. "Understood," Miguel responded, voice deliberately subdued. "Better!" Ramirez stepped. Back, satisfaction evident. "You'll transport our product starting next week. Arrangements to follow. Today's lesson is complimentary. Future disobedience costs significantly more." The enforcer released Miguel's arm with a contemptuous shove. Miguel remained kneeling, allowing desert dust to coat his jeans while maintaining the appearance of cowed submission. The psychological tactic was familiar. Public humiliation, establishing dominance hierarchy, ensuring compliance through demonstrated power. "Stand up, driver," Ramirez ordered finally, knife disappearing into his pocket. "Continue your delivery. Our associates will contact you with details for your return crossing." Miguel rose slowly, movements deliberately unsteady, as if shaken by the encounter. The performance satisfied Ramirez, whose posture shifted from threat to dismissal. The cartel members returned to their vehicles, mission accomplished. Another transport asset secured through standard intimidation protocols. Inside his truck, Miguel wiped blood from his cheek with mechanical precision, his expression revealing nothing as he watched the cartel vehicles depart. 3 years ago, sports commentators had marveled at his emotional control under pressure, the unnerving calm that had earned him the Silencer nickname long before his devastating counterstrikes became legendary. Miguel started his engine, pulling back onto the highway with methodical care. Through his mirror, he noted a cartel pickup, maintaining surveillance at professional distance. His mind catalogued the encounter's details with the same analytical precision that had once helped him identify opponents' weaknesses during fight reviews. Ramirez had 5 men, each carrying concealed weapons judging from their movement patterns. 2 demonstrated rudimentary hand-to-hand training based on their grip techniques and stance adjustments. The organizational structure followed standard cartel protocols: territorial control, asset acquisition, intimidation enforcement. What they couldn't possibly know was that forcing Miguel Ortiz to kneel in the dust was the most dangerous mistake they could have made. The same disciplined restraint they'd mistaken for weakness had once allowed him to absorb 3 rounds of punishment before executing the most celebrated comeback knockout in MMA championship history. As the Texas border landscape stretched before him, Miguel touched the small cut on his cheek. The cartel had just followed the same flawed strategy 28 professional fighters had attempted in the octagon, establishing dominance through intimidation rather than recognizing the deadly counterfighter beneath the calm exterior. In his professional career, Miguel had never initiated aggression. He had simply made opponents pay for theirs. Los Lobos cartel had just set the same trap for themselves, with far higher stakes than a championship belt. The isolated turnout appeared exactly where Miguel had calculated, an unmarked gravel expanse overlooking the Rio Grande Valley. He guided his Kenworth off the highway with practiced precision, positioning it for optimal visibility while maintaining quick access to the main road. Standard defensive positioning, adapted from the same tactical awareness that had once helped him control fighting space in the octagon. Through specialized mirrors, Miguel confirmed the cartel surveillance vehicle had maintained its distance, now parking 400 yards back on an elevated curve. The observer was good. Professional distance, minimal exposure, consistent tracking without obvious pursuit patterns. Miguel exited his truck, movements deliberately casual as he performed a standard inspection routine. To the observer, he appeared to be checking tires and connections, normal trucker behavior. In reality, Miguel was activating specialized compartments concealed throughout his vehicle. The first compartment, hidden beneath modified floor panels, contained fighting equipment carefully selected during his transition from MMA champion to anonymous trucker, hand wraps, specialized gloves, protective gear designed for real combat rather than sport fighting, equipment that would raise serious questions during standard inspections. "Plan for the worst, hope for the best," Miguel murmured, the pre-fight mantra that had guided his championship career now applying to a very different arena. His sat phone connected to a secure channel, bypassing standard cellular networks that Cartel surveillance would monitor. "Lobo, Ortiz here. Situation developing on Route 16. Los Lobos Cartel made contact. Standard intimidation protocol." The response came from Marco "Lobo" Gutierrez, former MMA training partner now working Border Patrol Special Operations. "Location confirmed. Nearest units 50 minutes from your position." Cartel activity elevated across entire sector. Miguel processed this information with the same calm assessment he'd once applied to fight strategy adjustments between rounds. "They're forcing independent truckers to carry product. Systematic. Operation, professional implementation. Consistent with current intelligence," Marco confirmed. "Los Lobos, expanding transport network across 3 border sectors, using intimidation first, violence for non-compliance." While conducting his truck inspection, Miguel accessed a second hidden compartment concealed within the sleeper berth wall. Inside, specialized defensive equipment reflected lessons learned across 15 years of professional fighting, protection optimized for real confrontation rather than regulated competition. "They made me kneel," Miguel stated without emotion. The simple fact, conveying everything his former teammate would understand. A moment of silence on the connection. "That's a mistake they'll regret. What's your play?" Miguel studied the landscape, identifying approach routes, cover positions, potential engagement areas. The same environmental assessment he'd conducted before every fight, adapted to terrain rather than octagon dimensions. Continuing to delivery point, they'll make contact again at border crossing or shortly after. Standard cartel procedure. Establish dominance, then present operational directives. Satellite shows 3 vehicles maintaining position along your route, Marco reported. Professional distribution, coordinated surveillance. Miguel's final inspection accessed defensive modifications concealed throughout his truck. Reinforcements designed to withstand impacts, specialized locking systems, security measures that would stop anyone without specific knowledge. Systems that reflected the same meticulous preparation that had once made him the most prepared fighter in the heavyweight division. "They'll escalate," Miguel predicted, his tactical assessment drawing on patterns recognized from both fighting career and 3 years observing cartel operations along border routes. First encounter established supposed dominance. Next, establishes consequences for non-compliance. "Need extraction options?" Marco asked, professional concern evident beneath. "Tactical planning." "Negative," Miguel replied, the same calm confidence that had once unnerved championship opponents. "Let them come to me. Controlled environment, my terms." Miguel's sat phone displayed new intelligence from Marco. Surveillance photos showing cartel vehicles establishing positions at strategic points along his route. The operational pattern confirmed his assessment. They were implementing standard interdiction protocols, positioning for forced stop and secondary confrontation. Using specialized tools, Miguel made final preparations to his truck's systems, implementing modifications that would prove crucial in the coming encounter. He checked his route options on secure mapping software, identifying potential ambush points where terrain would favor the cartel's numerical advantage. "Cargo delivery remains primary objective," Miguel noted, the disciplined focus on mission. Parameters reflecting the same professional mindset that had once made him reject flashy knockouts in favor of strategic victories. "Miguel!" Marco's voice carried the gravity of someone who understood exactly what Los Lobos had inadvertently activated. "These aren't regulated opponents, no referee, no rules." Neither was the street, Miguel replied simply, referring to the unspoken history both men shared. The barrio fights that had preceded their professional careers, where survival mattered more than championship belts. As Miguel completed his preparations, he studied the distant Cartel observer through specialized optics. The man maintained professional surveillance, coordinating movements with unseen teams via encrypted communications. Their operational discipline confirmed Miguel's assessment. These weren't random criminals, but organized tactical units implementing established protocols. Miguel touched the small cut on his cheek, the dried blood a reminder of the public. Humiliation intended to ensure compliance. Throughout his fighting career, opponents had mistaken his calm for weakness, his restraint for lack of killer instinct. Those misconceptions had cost 28 professional fighters their undefeated records. Now Los Lobos Cartel was making the identical error with significantly higher stakes. The highway stretched before him as Miguel returned to his truck, completing final mental preparation with the same disciplined focus that had once made sports psychologists study his pre-fight routines. The Cartel had established the engagement parameters through their initial intimidation attempt. Now Miguel would control the battlefield through the same strategic patience that had made him the most feared counterfighter in MMA history. "Time to go to work," he murmured. The quiet phrase exactly what he'd told his cornermen before each championship round. Inside his truck, Miguel Ortiz, once known throughout the fighting world as the Silencer, guided his Kenworth back onto the highway with calculated precision, ready for whatever came next. The border highway stretched endlessly across the Texas landscape, Miguel's Kenworth maintaining steady pace while his mind processed the approaching confrontation. Through specialized mirrors, he tracked the Cartel vehicles, maintaining coordinated surveillance, one pickup trailing at professional distance, another paralleling his route on a secondary road. Their disciplined operation triggered memories. Miguel usually kept carefully compartmentalized. Madison Square Garden, 2018. Championship fight against Dominic the Destroyer Williams. Similar tactical situation. Opponent establishing pressure, forcing engagement on their terms, creating the illusion of dominance. The sports networks had broadcast Miguel's bloody face after round 2, commentators declaring the title reign effectively over. None had recognized the calculated patience behind his apparent defensive posture. "Patience beats power," Miguel murmured, the mantra his first trainer had drilled into him decades earlier in the rundown Laredo gym where his fighting journey began. His professional record showed 28 victories, 17 by knockout. Statistics that failed to capture his true fighting philosophy. Miguel had never initiated aggression, never charged forward recklessly like so many heavyweights. He had built his career on disciplined counterfighting, turning opponents' aggression against them with devastating precision. The desert landscape triggered another memory. His final championship defense against Viktor Baransky, the Russian power puncher who had promised to silence the Silencer. Miguel had absorbed punishment for 2 brutal rounds before executing the counter right hook that doctors later confirmed had fractured 3 bones in Baransky's face. The victory had cemented his legacy while hiding the career-ending injury. Sustained in the exchange, Miguel checked his route calculator, estimating 30 minutes before reaching the isolated stretch where satellite imagery showed Cartel vehicles establishing position. His cargo manifest displayed on the specialized screen, industrial equipment bound for manufacturing facilities in Monterrey. Legitimate cargo, standard delivery, route he'd driven dozens of times before Los Lobos expanded their territorial control. The torn rotator cuff and herniated discs from the Baransky fight had ended his MMA career at its peak. Surgical repair had restored functional movement, but left him unable to withstand the training rigors professional fighting demanded. The transition from championship belts to steering wheels had come not from choice, but necessity. "Adapt or die," Miguel whispered, another lesson from his fighting days that had guided his civilian transition. Trucking had offered structure, routine, and the solitude Miguel preferred after years of media spotlight. The border routes connected him to his Mexican heritage while maintaining distance from fighting world recognition. Few recognized former heavyweight champion Miguel, the silencer Ortiz, beneath the weathered cap and quiet demeanor he cultivated on delivery routes. His phone displayed a message from his sister in Nuevo Laredo, photos of his nieces at their school recital, family that depended on the legitimate income his trucking provided, innocent lives potentially endangered if he became entangled in cartel operations. The personal stakes transcended professional pride or territorial disputes. Miguel's fighting career had been defined by control, emotional, tactical, physical. Championship bouts worth millions had never provoked the cold fury he'd felt kneeling in the dust at Ramirez's command. The calculated humiliation had awakened something Miguel had learned to harness rather than suppress during 15 years of professional competition. Through his windshield, Miguel spotted the first tactical indicator, a pickup truck with identical configuration to cartel vehicles he'd previously observed, positioned at an upcoming rest area. The driver's apparent casualness betrayed by precise positioning offering optimal observation of approaching traffic. Amateur surveillance technique compared to the disciplined fighters who had once studied Miguel's every movement for exploitable patterns. First checkpoint, Miguel assessed, recognizing standard cartel procedure for monitoring high-value targets. His professional fighting career had taught Miguel to identify predators instinctively, distinguishing between opponents who fought from discipline versus those who fought from pathological aggression. Ramirez belonged to the latter category, a predator who enjoyed domination rather than simply enforcing organizational objectives. The distinction would prove crucial in the coming confrontation. Miguel maintained steady speed past the observation vehicle, presenting the appearance of a routine driver unaware of surveillance. His peripheral vision caught the observer speaking into a radio, confirming target movement, coordinating with forward elements, implementing standard interdiction protocols. The border landscape opened before him, revealing the isolated stretch where satellite imagery had shown cartel vehicles. Establishing position, no civilian traffic, limited visibility from main highways, perfect territory for enforcing organizational will without witnesses. Tactical considerations Miguel processed through the same analytical framework that had once helped him dismantle championship opponents' strategies. Location confirmed, Miguel noted, recognizing the tactical advantage the terrain offered his opponents. Multiple approach vectors, limited escape routes, natural channelization forcing predictable movement. The memories surfaced unbidden. His first professional fight after emerging from Laredo's street competitions. Opponents had underestimated him then too, seeing only a quiet Mexican-American fighter lacking the flamboyant aggression that attracted promotional attention. The misconception had ended with an unconscious opponent and the first demonstration of the counter-fighting brilliance that would eventually make Miguel a champion. Through specialized mirrors, Miguel spotted dust clouds marking vehicle movement. On parallel access roads, cartel teams implementing coordinated positioning for the coming interdiction. Their tactical approach confirmed his assessment. They were following standard protocols for escalating enforcement against non-compliant targets. Miguel touched the small cut on his cheek, the wound intentionally left unbandaged. Throughout his fighting career, opponents had mistaken his calm for weakness, his strategic patience for fear. Those misconceptions had created the openings that led to devastating counters and championship victories. Now Los Lobos cartel was making the identical error with significantly higher stakes. Miguel Ortiz had never initiated aggression in professional competition. He had simply made opponents pay for theirs, a fighting philosophy Ramirez was about to learn through painful experience. The highway curved downward into an arroyo that created natural containment, perfect location for the cartel's planned interdiction. Miguel's expression remained impassive as he guided his Kenworth toward the waiting confrontation, his mind settling into the focused clarity that had once made him the most feared counterfighter in professional MMA. The arroyo stretched before Miguel's Kenworth like a natural trap. Steep embankments on both sides, limited visibility around curves, perfect terrain for coordinated interdiction. Through specialized mirrors, he tracked dust clouds signaling vehicle movement on parallel access roads, cartel teams implementing standard flanking protocols. Three-point containment formation, Miguel assessed, recognizing tactical deployment. Patterns similar to fighting strategies he'd once countered in the octagon. Opponents establishing dominant position, restricting movement options, creating the illusion of inescapable pressure. The first cartel vehicle appeared exactly where Miguel had anticipated, a black SUV positioned across the narrowest section of road, creating a partial blockade that would force approaching traffic to reduce speed. Two armed men stood beside it, the casual display of weapons marking territory beyond law enforcement influence. Miguel maintained steady speed, presenting the appearance of routine driver awareness while his mind calculated optimal response scenarios. Through combat-trained peripheral vision, he detected additional vehicles moving into secondary positions. Two pickups establishing flanking coverage, another SUV closing distance behind to prevent retreat. Standard containment complete, Miguel noted with professional detachment. The cartel had implemented textbook vehicle interdiction, primary blockade, secondary containment, tertiary pursuit closure. Tactical deployment that reflected formal training rather than opportunistic criminal behavior. As Miguel's truck approached the blockade, the lead SUV flashed headlights in the universal signal to stop. He complied with deliberate precision, bringing his Kenworth to a halt at calculated distance, close enough to appear cooperative, far enough to maintain reaction time advantage. Ramirez emerged from the lead vehicle, 5 armed men spreading into standard security formation around him. Their coordinated movement betrayed professional training, each maintaining optimal fields of fire while establishing visual dominance of the scene. Miguel activated his truck's specialized recording systems, another modification that would raise serious questions during standard inspections. The concealed cameras would document whatever followed, preserving evidence for potential legal proceedings or tactical analysis. Compliance training begins, Ramirez announced, as Miguel stepped down from his cab, the cartel leader's voice carrying the satisfaction of someone who believed victory already secured. Kneel. Miguel assessed the tactical situation with combat-honed precision. 8 visible cartel members, multiple weapons including automatic rifles, disciplined positioning, establishing overlapping coverage. The same threat evaluation he'd conducted before 28 professional fights, adapted to life-or-death stakes rather than sporting competition. "I have deliveries to make," Miguel responded, his voice carrying the controlled calm that had once unnerved championship opponents. "Let me pass." Ramirez's expression hardened at the unexpected resistance. He signaled to his men, 2 immediately moving to flank Miguel while maintaining professional spacing. "Perhaps our first lesson wasn't sufficiently educational," Ramirez gestured toward Miguel's cut cheek. "Today's instruction will be more comprehensive." The flanking cartel members attempted to secure Miguel's arms using standard control techniques, the same approach security personnel employed against belligerent civilians. Their movements betrayed confidence based on numerical advantage rather than fighting expertise. Miguel allowed initial contact, assessing their grip strength, balance distribution, and tactical awareness. The evaluation confirmed his earlier Assessment, basic enforcement training rather than specialized combat experience. The distinction had once helped him identify exploitable weaknesses in opponents with impressive records but fundamental technical flaws. Final opportunity, Ramirez stated, producing the same knife he'd used during their first encounter. "Kneel, or my men will ensure you never drive again." Miguel maintained calculated non-resistance as the cartel members secured control positions. Their confidence grew visibly, professional spacing deteriorating as they assumed compliant submission. From their target, the tactical error created the opening Miguel had patiently awaited. With precision movement developed through thousands of training hours, he shifted weight distribution imperceptibly, establishing optimal counterposition, while maintaining the appearance of submission. "You should have researched who you were targeting," Miguel stated quietly, the calm voice that had once signaled imminent danger to experienced fighters. Ramirez stepped closer, confusion momentarily replacing arrogance. "You're nobody. Another trucker who needs to learn his place." "Miguel the Silencer Ortiz," a new voice called from among the cartel ranks. One of the armed men had finally recognized the man they were threatening. Heavyweight champion, 28 wins. Recognition flashed across Ramirez's face, momentary uncertainty quickly replaced by redoubled aggression. "Former champion," he emphasized, knife moving closer to Miguel's face. "Now just another trucker who bleeds." The escalation confirmed Miguel's psychological assessment. Ramirez belonged to the category of predators who interpreted hesitation as weakness rather than strategy. The same fatal misunderstanding that had once led championship contenders to mistake Miguel's defensive patience for fear. What followed happened with the precise technical execution that had once made fighting analysts study Miguel's matches frame by frame. The cartel members maintaining control positions suddenly found their balance compromised, grip leverage reversed, and joint integrity challenged by movement sequences optimized through 15 years of professional fighting. Both men dropped to the ground before their consciousness fully registered what had happened. Textbook control techniques executed with championship-level precision. Miguel immediately established optimal defensive position, his movement patterns displaying the fluid efficiency that had once defined his octagon performances. Ramirez's expression transformed from confidence to shock as Miguel neutralized two armed men in less than 4 seconds without apparent effort. The remaining cartel members raised weapons, but uncertainty had replaced their earlier tactical discipline, the sudden demonstration of fighting expertise creating momentary decision paralysis. "Kill him!" Ramirez shouted, knife forgotten as he retreated toward armed protection. The cartel members hesitated, professional self-preservation overriding command compliance. The man who had recognized Miguel placed restraining hand on his colleague's weapon. "That's Miguel Ortiz," he repeated with growing urgency. "The counterfighting specialist." The tactical standoff crystallized as both sides reassessed changing parameters. What had begun as routine intimidation had escalated to potentially lethal confrontation against someone with world-class combat capabilities. Miguel maintained defensive positioning while identifying optimal withdrawal routes. The situation had evolved beyond resolution through demonstration. Ramirez's pride would demand escalation, regardless of tactical advisability. Vehicle headlights suddenly appeared around the curve, momentarily disrupting the confrontation. Miguel recognized the opportunity, implementing the same strategic distance management that had once helped him control championship fights against aggressive opponents. The approaching vehicle, an 18-wheeler operated by another independent trucker, provided momentary distraction that Miguel exploited with championship timing. His retreat to his truck's cab carried the same controlled efficiency that had once defined his fighting style. As Miguel's Kenworth roared to life, Ramirez's fury overrode tactical consideration. "No one escapes Los Lobos! Find him! Stop him!" The specialized mirrors revealed cartel vehicles scrambling to resume pursuit formation, their previous coordination compromised by the unexpected confrontation outcome. Miguel guided his truck forward with the same precision that had once helped him capitalize on opponents' disrupted timing. The initial containment had failed, but Miguel harbored no illusion about the confrontation's conclusion. Los Lobos Cartel controlled these territories through demonstrated dominance. Ramirez would commit whatever resources necessary to re-establish the perception of absolute authority. The real battle was just beginning. The border highway stretched before Miguel's. Kenworth, his specialized mirrors tracking 3 cartel vehicles, maintaining aggressive pursuit formation. Dust clouds on parallel access roads revealed additional teams, moving to establish forward interdiction, standard envelopment strategy against fleeing targets. Miguel calculated distances and speeds with the same tactical precision that had once helped him time championship-winning counters. Committed to full containment, he assessed, noting the resources Ramirez was dedicating to the pursuit. 8 vehicles minimum, coordinated movement patterns suggesting centralized command and control. The escalation confirmed Miguel's psychological assessment. Los Lobos considered this confrontation critical to maintaining territorial authority. The highway curved around a massive rock formation, momentarily blocking pursuit vehicles from direct visual contact. Miguel immediately implemented counter-pursuit protocols, activating his truck's specialized systems while executing a precision driving maneuver that positioned his vehicle in natural concealment behind the formation. Through concealed observation, Miguel watched the cartel vehicles race past his position, their drivers maintaining pursuit speed while scanning empty highway ahead. The tactical deception created critical advantage, disrupting their coordination while providing Miguel opportunity to assess options with reduced time pressure. His sat phone displayed upcoming terrain features, the highway descending into a narrow valley with limited maneuverability and predictable traffic flow. Perfect location for the secondary ambush Ramirez would undoubtedly establish after regrouping his scattered pursuit teams. Standard recovery protocol, Miguel murmured, recognizing tactical patterns similar to how opponents would attempt to re-establish dominant position after failed attacks in the octagon. Predictable response sequences that created exploitable openings for counter-fighters who maintained tactical patience. Miguel guided his truck back onto the highway, implementing route adjustments to avoid the obvious ambush location while maintaining progress toward his delivery destination. The specialized mapping system identified alternative passage through maintenance access roads, less direct but offering superior defensive positioning against numerically superior opposition. The tactical repositioning brought approximately 12 minutes before Ramirez's teams recognized their containment failure and established new pursuit parameters. Miguel used the time to contact Marco via secure channel, updating his former training partner on the escalating situation. Confrontation initiated, Miguel reported with clinical precision. 8 cartel members, multiple vehicles, automatic, weapons present. Ramirez escalated to lethal threat parameters after recognition occurred. Recognition, Marco questioned. One identified me from fighting career. Situation deteriorated immediately. Marco's response carried professional concern. Beneath tactical planning, satellite shows multiple vehicles converging on your position from forward locations. They're establishing comprehensive containment grid. Nearest Border Patrol tactical unit, still 30 minutes from intercept position. Miguel processed this information through the same analytical framework that had once helped him adjust championship fight strategies between rounds. Ramirez can't afford to let this pass. His authority depends on successful enforcement. Agreed. Intelligence indicates Los Lobos has established forward containment at Diablo's Crossing. No viable bypass routes with your vehicle class. The Location confirmation matched Miguel's tactical projection. Diablo's crossing presented perfect interdiction terrain, narrow passage, limited visibility, natural channelization, forcing predictable approach vectors. Attempting to navigate through would place Miguel at overwhelming tactical disadvantage, regardless of his fighting capabilities. Options? Miguel asked, the same calm inquiry he'd once directed to his corner team when facing unexpected tactical challenges in championship bouts. Abandon vehicle. Extraction team can retrieve you from coordinates Lima 3, Marco suggested, providing standard escape protocol for compromised transport operators. Miguel checked his cargo manifest, the commitment to professional responsibility unchanged, despite escalating personal danger. Negative, delivery remains primary objective. Through specialized mirrors, Miguel spotted the first pursuit vehicles reappearing, Ramirez's teams having recognized their tactical error and re-established tracking parameters. Their approach speed indicated heightened aggression, professional containment protocols abandoned in favor of overwhelming pursuit pressure. Miguel guided his Kenworth toward a roadside maintenance station, concrete structures offering temporary defensive positioning against vehicular pursuit. The tactical selection reflected the same environmental awareness that had once helped him utilize octagon geography to neutralize opponents' offensive capabilities. The pursuit vehicles accelerated as Miguel's truck slowed near the maintenance station, Ramirez's teams interpreting the speed reduction as vulnerability rather than strategic positioning. Their eagerness created critical tactical error, compromising professional spacing while approaching prepared defensive position. Miguel brought his Kenworth to precisely calculated stop, positioning the massive vehicle to establish optimal cover, while maintaining clear observation of approach vectors. The same strategic control of engagement space that had once frustrated championship opponents, attempting to force confrontation on their terms. When the first cartel vehicles converged on his position, Miguel was prepared. He moved from his truck with championship timing, establishing defensive position behind concrete barriers while maintaining visual tracking of all approaching threats. His movement patterns displayed the fluid efficiency that had once defined his professional fighting career. 4 cartel members emerged from the lead vehicle, weapons raised, aggression overriding tactical discipline. Their positioning betrayed amateur enforcement training rather than professional combat experience. Clustered approach, compromised spacing, inadequate environmental awareness. Fundamental errors no trained fighter would commit. Dead-end champion, the leader called, using professional recognition as attempted psychological leverage. 8 of us, 1 of you. Math doesn't work. Miguel maintained defensive positioning, his expression revealing nothing as he calculated distance, approach angles, and reaction time differentials. The same tactical assessment that had once helped him identify optimal counter-striking opportunities against aggressive opponents. What followed demonstrated why Miguel, the silencer Ortiz, had once been considered the most technically perfect counterfighter in professional MMA. As the cartel members closed distance, their aggression created precisely the openings Miguel had patiently awaited. The first 2 attackers found themselves neutralized before fully registering what had happened. Championship-level striking techniques executed with surgical precision against unprepared opponents. The remaining cartel members hesitated, professional self-preservation overriding enforcement objectives as they witnessed fighting capabilities beyond their tactical experience. "He's not just a fighter," one warned, recognition prompting tactical reassessment. "That's the champion, the counter-specialist." The momentary hesitation created critical advantage Miguel exploited with the same timing that had once defined his championship performances. His movement toward secondary defensive position carried calculated efficiency, maintaining optimal distance while establishing superior tactical positioning. 3 more cartel members attempted coordinated engagement, their approach betraying basic enforcement training rather than specialized combat experience. Miguel's response demonstrated the difference between professional fighting excellence and standard physical aggression. Precision techniques neutralizing multiple opponents through superior positioning, timing, and technical execution. Within 30 seconds, 7 cartel members were incapacitated without Miguel sustaining significant damage, the outcome resembling his most dominant championship performances. The 8th attacker retreated to his vehicle, tactical discipline abandoned in favor of survival prioritization. As engines roared in the distance, signaling Ramirez's approach with reinforcements, Miguel returned to his truck with the same controlled efficiency that had once helped him capitalize on successful counters. The initial defensive victory had been decisive, but tactical assessment indicated the real confrontation was yet to come. Ramirez would now commit everything to re-establishing dominance. The escalation had just begun. The desert terrain transformed into tactical battlefield as Miguel's Kenworth pushed through the narrow passage approaching Diablo's crossing. Heat rippled across the barren landscape, creating mirage effects that distorted distant observation. Through specialized mirrors, he tracked multiple dust clouds converging from different directions, Ramirez mobilizing all available resources for the coming confrontation. Full commitment, Miguel assessed, noting the scale of response his initial defensive victory had provoked. The tactical deployment confirmed his psychological evaluation. Los Lobos considered this enforcement operation critical to maintaining territorial authority and cartel discipline. His sat phone displayed satellite imagery from Marco, showing the developing situation with clinical precision. 12 vehicles minimum establishing comprehensive blockade across all passage routes, multiple armed teams deploying in professional containment. Formation, Ramirez himself directing operations from central command position. Diablo's crossing completely sealed, Marco reported through secure channel. Tactical team still 22 minutes from potential engagement. You need to find alternative route. Miguel studied the terrain through combat-trained analysis. The crossing presented perfect interdiction geography, steep rock formations channeling all traffic through a single passage easily monitored and controlled. No viable bypass existed for a vehicle of his Kenworth's size and weight classification. Negative. On alternative, Miguel confirmed, making final mental preparations for the confrontation ahead. Crossing remains only viable option for scheduled delivery. The professional commitment to mission completion remained unchanged despite escalating personal danger. The same disciplined focus that had once helped Miguel maintain tactical execution through the most punishing championship rounds. Miguel, Marco's voice carried the urgency of someone who understood exactly what approaching Diablo's crossing meant against these odds. There's at least 30 cartel members. Automatic. Weapons, tactical positioning, clear fields of fire. This isn't an octagon with referees and rules. Understood, Miguel replied, the same calm acknowledgement that had once preceded his most challenging title defenses. Through his windshield, Miguel identified the first tactical indicators, vehicles, positioned to establish traditional choke point containment. 3 SUVs creating primary blockade across the road. Technical pickups with mounted equipment establishing elevated firing positions on surrounding ridgelines. Professional deployment optimizing terrain advantage. Miguel guided his truck to precisely calculated stop, positioning the massive vehicle to establish optimal cover while maintaining clear observation of deployed forces. The same strategic control of engagement space that had once frustrated championship opponents attempting to force confrontation on their terms. As his Kenworth's engine fell silent, the magnitude of Ramirez's response became fully apparent. Cartel. Members established professional security perimeter, weapons visible, tactical positioning demonstrating coordinated preparation. This was no longer routine enforcement, but full operational commitment against a target designated for absolute neutralization. Miguel's combat-trained senses registered the approaching helicopter before its sound became audible, rotors creating distinctive dust patterns visible through specialized mirrors. The aerial asset confirmed escalation beyond standard cartel protocols, indicating leadership involvement from higher organizational levels than Ramirez himself. "They've brought air support," Miguel informed Marco through secure channel. "Military. Grade. Based on approach pattern." "Confirmed." Marco's voice carried controlled urgency. "Satellite shows Bell UH-1 variant approaching your position. Registered to shell company with known cartel connections. Miguel, this is beyond enforcement. They've classified you as primary threat to operational security." The tactical assessment confirmed what Miguel had already calculated through combat experience. His identification as former MMA champion, combined with demonstrated fighting capabilities, had transformed routine enforcement into existential challenge to cartel authority. Ramirez couldn't allow such direct defiance to stand without comprehensive response. The helicopter circled overhead as a black Mercedes approached the blockade. Through thermal imaging, Miguel identified the vehicle's armored specifications, defensive capabilities, indicating occupant of significant organizational importance. Los Lobos regional leadership had arrived to witness Ramirez's enforcement operation. "Final opportunity, champion." Ramirez's voice projected through vehicle-mounted speakers, the public address system ensuring all deployed forces heard the exchange. "Surrender now for minimal consequences. Resistance ensures maximum response." Miguel remained silent, using the time to complete final mental preparation while conducting comprehensive threat assessment. The same disciplined pre-engagement routine that had once helped him prepare for championship bouts now applied to life-or-death confrontation. From his position, Miguel identified 37 cartel members deployed in tactical formation. Multiple automatic weapons, professional positioning establishing overlapping fields of fire, air support providing operational oversight and potential engagement capabilities. Leadership observation, ensuring maximum motivation among enforcement personnel. The tactical disadvantage appeared overwhelming by any conventional assessment, yet Miguel recognized the same fundamental weakness he'd exploited throughout his fighting career. Opponents who mistook numerical advantage for tactical superiority, who believed aggression automatically overcame technical precision. "Commencing final enforcement," Ramirez announced after Miguel's continued silence. "All units advance." The cartel forces moved with coordinated precision that betrayed professional training beyond standard criminal operations. Their deployment followed military-inspired protocols, maintaining covering fire positions, utilizing terrain features for tactical advantage, implementing phased approach to overwhelm defensive capabilities. Miguel moved from his truck with championship timing, establishing initial defensive position with the same calculated efficiency that had defined his octagon performances. His movement patterns displayed none of the hesitation opponents might expect from someone facing such overwhelming disadvantage. The first engagement team approached with professional caution, their tactics reflecting lessons learned from the previous confrontation. 6 men moving in coordinated formation, maintaining disciplined spacing, approaching from multiple angles to prevent effective counter-response. What they couldn't anticipate was Miguel's lifetime of preparation for precisely such tactical scenarios. The specialized training that had made him heavyweight champion hadn't focused on dominating controlled sporting exchanges, but neutralizing multiple opponents in actual combat situations. The confrontation revealed the difference between enforcement, training and championship fighting capability. Miguel's movement carried the fluid precision that had once made fighting analysts study his matches frame by frame. Perfect technical execution, optimized through thousands of training hours under world-class instruction. 2 cartel members were neutralized before their colleagues registered what was happening. Championship-level striking techniques executed against pressure points and structural vulnerabilities no casual observer would identify. The remaining 4 hesitated momentarily, professional self-preservation creating critical timing, disruption Miguel exploited with practiced efficiency. A second team approached from alternative angle, their coordination indicating specialized tactical training. Miguel registered their movement patterns through combat-honed peripheral awareness, adjusting positioning to establish optimal counter-response capability. The same environmental control that had once helped him neutralize championship opponents' offensive strategies in the octagon. Through the escalating confrontation, Miguel maintained the focused clarity that had once made him the most feared counterfighter in professional MMA. Each movement served specific tactical purpose. Each position established precise advantage. Each response exploited fundamental weaknesses in his opponent's approach. From his elevated observation position, Ramirez watched his enforcement operation disintegrating against a single opponent, moving with impossible efficiency. His expression transformed from confident authority to growing rage, as Miguel neutralized trained cartel members with the same technical precision that had once earned him worldwide recognition. "Kill him," Ramirez ordered, tactical consideration abandoned in favor of overwhelming force application. "Everyone advance, now!" The barren landscape of Diablo's Crossing erupted in tactical chaos as Ramirez's remaining forces converged on Miguel's position. The coordinated assault reflected desperate escalation, professional containment protocols abandoned in favor of overwhelming numerical pressure. Through combat-honed awareness, Miguel tracked multiple approach vectors while maintaining optimal defensive positioning. "Full commitment engaged," Miguel assessed, recognizing the tactical pattern from championship bouts when desperate opponents abandoned strategy for pure aggression. The psychological shift created exploitable vulnerabilities despite apparent numerical advantage. The helicopter circled overhead, its downdraft whipping dust across the confrontation zone as cartel leadership observed the operation from elevated position. Through thermal imaging, Miguel identified the regional commander emerging from the armored Mercedes. Los Lobos' highest authority in the sector, arriving to witness Ramirez's increasingly desperate enforcement attempt. Miguel maintained the focused clarity that had once defined his championship performances, each movement serving specific tactical purpose despite the escalating chaos surrounding him. 3 more cartel members approached with coordinated aggression, their technique betraying basic combat training rather than professional fighting experience. The distinction had proven decisive throughout Miguel's MMA career. What followed demonstrated why Miguel the Silencer Ortiz had been considered the most technically perfect counterfighter in heavyweight history. As the cartel members closed distance, their aggression created precisely the openings Miguel had patiently anticipated. His counterstrikes carried the surgical precision that had once made fighting analysts study his techniques frame by frame, perfectly executed responses exploiting fundamental biomechanical vulnerabilities. "It's not working," a cartel member shouted as his colleagues dropped around him, professional enforcement confidence replaced by growing fear. "He's neutralizing everyone we send." From his command position, Ramirez's expression transformed from tactical authority to uncontrolled rage. His enforcement operation was disintegrating before regional leadership, career advancement replaced by professional humiliation as a single opponent systematically demolished his tactical advantage. "Everyone at once," Ramirez ordered, abandoning all pretense of professional protocol. "Overwhelm him with numbers." The remaining cartel forces hesitated momentarily, professional self-preservation overriding command compliance as they witnessed Miguel's fighting capabilities exceeding anything their enforcement training had prepared them for. The tactical disruption created critical advantage Miguel exploited with championship timing. Through the chaos, one figure advanced with different purpose. Ramirez himself, abandoning command position to engage directly, professional discipline. Replaced by personal vendetta, his movement betrayed formal combatives training, stance, and approach, indicating military or specialized enforcement background rather than street fighting experience. "Just you and me now, champion," Ramirez called, producing a tactical knife while establishing aggressive stance. No referees, no rules, no octagon. Miguel assessed his opponent with the same analytical precision that had once helped him identify critical weaknesses in championship contenders. Ramirez's positioning revealed solid fundamentals compromised by emotional escalation, proper technique undermined by rage-induced overcommitment. The tactical vulnerability mirrored mistakes Miguel had exploited throughout his professional career. "There never were rules," Miguel responded, the quiet statement carrying more menace than Ramirez's theatrical threats. What followed resembled Miguel's most dominant championship performances, translated to life-or-death stakes. As Ramirez attacked with aggressive knife techniques, Miguel's response demonstrated the difference between enforcement training and world-class fighting capability. Perfect defensive positioning, neutralizing offensive advantage through superior timing, distance management, and technical execution. Ramirez's initial attack met empty air as Miguel established optimal counterposition. His secondary assault found wrist control compromised before tactical awareness registered the vulnerability. His desperate third attempt resulted in complete positional disadvantage as Miguel implemented the same joint manipulation techniques that had once frustrated championship opposition. The knife clattered to the ground as Ramirez found himself in precisely the control position Miguel had specialized in throughout his MMA career. The cartel enforcer's expression transformed from rage to fear as he recognized the technical mastery, now controlling his structural integrity with surgical precision. "Professional courtesy," Miguel stated quietly, applying calculated pressure that rendered Ramirez unconscious without permanent damage. The same technical efficiency that had once earned him respect throughout the fighting world. As Ramirez collapsed, the remaining cartel forces reassessed tactical parameters with growing urgency. Their commander neutralized, operational structure compromised, and opponent demonstrating fighting capabilities beyond their collective enforcement experience. The confrontation's momentum shifted decisively as new vehicles approached from the highway. Border Patrol tactical units arriving with perfect timing as Los Lobos leadership ordered immediate withdrawal. The helicopter departed first, followed by the armored Mercedes and remaining cartel vehicles not disabled during the confrontation. "Perfect counter-timing," Marco noted as he approached Miguel's position, professional appreciation evident beneath. "Tactical concern, just like your third title defense." Miguel nodded recognition to his former training partner as federal agents secured the scene, their efficiency indicating specialized tactical training. The operational transition reflected professional protocols Miguel recognized from his own military-inspired training regimen, 12 cartel members requiring medical attention, a tactical team leader reported. None with life-threatening injuries, despite comprehensive neutralization. Impressive restraint. Marco studied the scene with professional assessment. They brought 37 operators with automatic weapons against one driver. Restraint was more than they deserved. Miguel conducted final evaluation of his truck, confirming operational integrity despite the confrontation. The cargo remained secured, delivery timelines still viable with adjusted route parameters. His professional commitment to mission completion remained unchanged despite the tactical interruption. We've been tracking Los Lobos expansion across 3 border sectors, Marco explained as Miguel prepared to resume his route. Your confrontation just provided probable cause for coordinated enforcement operation against their entire regional infrastructure. Satellite imagery displayed on specialized screens showed federal operations unfolding across multiple locations. Tactical teams executing synchronized raids on cartel positions identified through intelligence gathered during the Diablo's crossing confrontation. Your cargo should reach its destination without further interference, Marco confirmed. Los Lobos leadership has more pressing concerns than one independent trucker. As Miguel guided his Kenworth back onto the highway, the tactical outcome reflected the same fighting philosophy that had once made him heavyweight champion. He had never initiated aggression throughout his professional career. He had simply made opponents pay for theirs, turning their offensive commitment against them through superior positioning, timing, and technical execution. 2 weeks later, Miguel's Kenworth traveled the same border route without incident. Through specialized mirrors, he noted the complete absence of cartel surveillance vehicles that had previously maintained territorial observation. The operational vacuum confirmed reports from Marco about comprehensive federal dismantling of Los Lobos infrastructure following the Diablo's crossing confrontation. At Rosie's truck stop, conversations quieted momentarily as Miguel entered, recognition replacing the previous anonymity he had cultivated on delivery routes. The tactical confrontation had transformed local perception, independent truckers now acknowledging the former champion in their midst with professional respect rather than celebrity fascination. "Heard what happened at Diablo's crossing," Rosie commented as she delivered his usual breakfast, some saying one driver took down 30 cartel enforcers single-handed. Miguel accepted the coffee with characteristic quiet, his expression revealing nothing as nearby patrons studied him with newfound awareness. The professional restraint that had once frustrated sports reporters seeking dramatic statements remained unchanged despite recent events. "Just doing my job," he responded simply, "delivering cargo where it needs to go." But both knew the border territories had fundamentally changed. Los Lobos cartel had learned the fatal lesson 28 professional fighters had discovered. In the octagon, Miguel the Silencer Ortiz never initiated aggression. He simply made opponents pay for theirs.